So I consider X, which will be, say, for example, rationally connected over an algebraically closed field of characteristic 0, so assume that it is over C. Then obviously the CH0 group is not interesting. Okay. But the situation is changing very much if instead of C I have a non-algebraically closed field. So that may be, of course, as a number field, but I will be interested more in the function field case. Then, of course, it's not true anymore. So, for example, you can now have cubic surfaces where defined over a number fields which have a non-trivial CH0 group. The best that we can do is that the CH0 is of torsion. So the kernel of the degree map. And so this observation leads to the notion of a universal Chow group. The universal Chow group, it's not a group, it's rather a motif, a functor. So my x over C is given, and this universal Chow group is a functor from the fields L containing C. So usually I will be interested only into function fields. Two groups, to L associate the CH0 of X now considered over the bigger field. And the definition is that X has a universally trivial Chow 0 group if and only if for any L containing C, CH0 of XL is Z. So I didn't say it. This isomorphism is given by the degree, which to a zero cycle associates it. So why the definition is interesting? It's because the lemma is that the projective space itself has a universally trivial CH0 group. That's essentially due to the fact that if you take 2 points, completely correct said like this, but if you take 2 points on a projective space on any field K, algebraically closed or not, there is a line through these 2 points. It is defined over the same field, and on this line, the 2 points, they are the divisor of a function which is also defined over the same field. So that's why you have this property, the CH0 of Pn over any field. It's always trivial. Okay. And because of that property, you conclude also by birational invariance of CH0 that any rational, or more generally stably rational variety has universally trivial CH0 group. So stably rational that means simply that X cross some projective space is rational. So that is a criterion for stable rationality or non-stable rationality. And I want to, of course, next one has to be able to compute So a better language that I like better, which is much more geometric, is in terms of decomposition of the diagonals. This has been already mentioned by Bert in our circuit seminar on algebraic cycles. So let me rephrase. The definition in terms of decomposition of the diagonal. So the point is that, let me give the definition. So the definition, so my x, which to assume that it has a dimension n, of course a smooth projective, I say that it admits Chow decomposition of the diagonal. If you can write, so you consider the diagonal, and so it's an n cycle in x cross x, and then you can so decompose it as the sum of two terms. So there is one obvious term. You choose a point, x. So this term is of course always needed, and then you have an extra term, and so this is an equality in Chn of x cross x. So all codimension. This has dimension 2n, and these cycles have all dimension n. And what you want is that this z is so it does not dominate x by the first projection. So it's supported on some d cross x, where d is a closed proper algebraic. Proper algebraic subset of x. So this is the definition. So let me say why the two properties are equivalent. So you have the equivalence. CH0 of x is universally trivial. If and only if x admits a Chow decomposition of diagonal. And the reason is simply the following. So let me just explain how you go from this to this. The point is that here you look at the definition of CH0 being universally trivial, and you observe that if you take for the field L the field of functions on x, then obviously you have the I call it delta. It's usually called eta. You have the generic point. Okay. Okay. So this is simply the generic point. Which is a L point. Yes, in fact, it's actually a L point of XL. It corresponds to simply so points of x defined over a function field C of y. They correspond to rational map from y to x. And so, if in the particular case where y is equal to x, you just take the identity, and that gives you a point. Okay, and so you have this point, and if you know that the CH0 of x is universally trivial, that will say that that point should be rationally equivalent to a constant point corresponding to a constant map from x to itself, mapping everything to this constant point in CH0 of XL. But then you do a little geometry. Basically, you think like this. So you have this spec L cross X, which is your XL. Okay, it's the limit of all the Zariski open set U cross of the form U cross X over all the U Zariski open set in X. Okay. And obviously the delta L is nothing but, so here you have the diagonal, and the delta L is just the diagonal restricted to this spec L cross X. So of course this is in CHN. So the diagonal is in CHN of X cross X. But this is in CHN of XL, of course. It's a zero cycle, the cycle over this field, but it's also a codimension n. And then, so finally, this equality that we have here, we say that because it holds over the generic point, it has to hold somewhere over. So for some Zariski open set, it has already to be true. So this equality here, this is equivalent to finally saying that delta x minus x cross x, it has to vanish already in some. And then you conclude by the localization. So this is this to you. You conclude by the localization exact sequence, which says that this is equivalent to saying that your delta x minus x cross x is rationally equivalent to a z, which is supported on d cross x, where d is simply the complement x minus u. So that gives you the implication in one sense, and in the other sense, it's not that hard to prove. Okay, so these two properties are equivalent. And so finally, so I will stick to that point of view of having a decomposition of the diagonal. And so this is a very interesting and powerful criterion for stable or non-stable rationality. So for example, I used this 1 year ago to prove that very general quartic double solid, so it's degree 2 cyclic covers of projective space P3 ramified along a quartic surface. They are not stably rational, and the novelty is that for stable rational equivalence, we cannot use the Clemens-Griffiths criterion, because stable rational equivalence we have to deal with higher dimensional varieties. So the Clemens-Griffiths criterion, it works for 3-dimensional varieties. And also there was another classical criterion for non-stable rational equivalence, which was the Artin-Mumford invariant. But for this quartic double solid, the Artin-Mumford invariant vanishes. So actually this is bringing some new giving some new information, which is, I think, quite interesting. Now, the point of view of the decomposition of the diagonal, its interest lies in the fact that you can weaken it. Namely, instead of considering the question whether X admits or not a Chow decomposition of the diagonal, you can ask simply whether it admits a cohomological decomposition of the diagonal. So definition, X admits a cohomological decomposition of the diagonal. If, so this is the same definition here, except that instead of having this equality in the Chow group, I just want to have it in cohomology. But the very important point is that I want to have it in integral cohomology. So okay, same definition, but the equality now is here. Where Z is superposed in on D cross X. So, and it's already an interesting property to study. Obviously, it's weaker. For example, I mentioned this Artin-Mumford invariant, the torsion in the integral Betti cohomology. It is already controlled by this decomposition. That is, if X admits decomposition, cohomological decomposition of the diagonal, you can show that the Artin-Mumford invariant vanishes. So this is, in fact, so what I want to, obviously this property is much weaker than this one, so you get this one just by taking cycle classes.
Because you said if I had this homological decomposition,
yeah, yeah.
So the Artin-Mumford is somehow linked to this.
In fact, so there are several invariants which are controlled by this. The argument is very simple. Cohomology classes on product, they act on cohomology. The diagonal act by the identity. You look at how the various terms in this decomposition act. Now, if you have a torsion in H3 of xz, you apply this, you get your alpha. Okay, this obviously it acts trivially on your class, and now you look at how acts this z. But basically, the reason is that your z per star alpha. So your z is supported on D cross X. So let's forget about the singularities of D, but basically imagine the D is smooth. Then you say that so you think to your z as a cycle in D cross X. Then this it is G lower star of say Z tilde upper star of alpha. So the key point is that it factors through this class, which is a class in H1 of your DZ. And the H1 of something has no torsion. So this has no torsion. And the conclusion is that if your class alpha is of torsion, this one will be 0. And finally, you will get that alpha is 0 plus that thing which is 0. So that's the way you get. So that's the way the decompositions are used. So obviously the integral decomposition of the cohomological decomposition of the diagonal is weaker than the Chow decomposition of the diagonal. But what I want to discuss today is a very curious fact concerning smooth cubic hypersurfaces. Which is as follows. So let X be a smooth cubic hypersurface in some projective space. Then X admits Chow decomposition of diagonal. Or equivalently, CH0 is universally trivial. If and only if X admits a cohomological decomposition of diagonal. So this is what I want to explain, and what is curious is that the argument is essentially so it's based on the same observation which was used in the Galkin and the Schender paper, which is a very classical geometric construction. So for typically, the starting point that if you consider an elliptic curve, you consider the second symmetric product of your elliptic curve, it's a P1 bundle over the elliptic curve. And this phenomenon, it continues essentially in any dimension, what I want to explain. And that will explain the proof of this. And then I will explain some applications. So maybe before going to this, I want to explain why I am interested into cubic hypersurfaces. As I said, these criteria are very powerful criteria for studying non-stable rationality of certain varieties. But for cubic, so I mentioned the case of the quartic double solids that I could solve. But for cubic hypersurfaces, we have very bad problems that we don't know that much. So if X, X is a cubic, so for example of dimension 3, there is this Clements-Griffiths result. We say that X is not rational. And of course, it's smooth here. But what is unknown is whether X, so X is stably rational or not. So well, I don't know how to solve this, but I will explain using that result a translation of this question into a very simple question concerning the intermediate Jacobian of X. So, and of course, in dimension 4, there is it is still unknown. If very general cubic fourfold is rational. So again, I am not able to solve that question, but well, I hope that the study of decomposition of the diagonal can help at some point. Okay. So let me explain how works the proof of that. Sorry, I forgot an assumption here. So assume. So it concerns either odd dimensional cubic or the case of the cubic fourfold. So in general, I have a small problem which I'm not sure. I'm not sure the result is true for higher dimensional, even dimensional cubics. So I am going to, yes, before I start the proof, let me make an observation. That, of course, here I mentioned decomposition of the diagonal in Chow, and then decomposition of the diagonal in cohomology. Of course, I could consider decomposition of the diagonal modulo other algebraic relations. So typically, I could consider decomposition of the diagonal modulo algebraic equivalence. In that case, so that by this I mean again that delta x minus x cross x should be equal to some c in, well, tau of x cross x modulo algebraic equivalence, where the again is supported like this. So a priori that may be an intermediate definition, but the lemma is that if x admits decomposition of the diagonal modulo algebraic equivalence, then it admits tau decomposition of diagonal. And the reason is simply the fact that well, it's trivial, but this decomposition of the diagonal modulo algebraic equivalence, you write it in the form that delta x minus x cross x minus z, it is algebraically equivalent to 0. And now there is this nilpotence result, which has just been mentioned by Ilie. That a cycle which is a self-correspondence which is algebraically equivalent to 0, it is a nilpotent. For the composition of correspondences. So this is this result by Voyevodsky and myself. Which is quite easy to prove, but quite useful. And so you write that this cycle to a certain power is 0 in tau. But when you write this equality, it's quite easy to show that gives you the true decomposition of the tau decomposition of the diagonal. So you just say that this is now 0 in tau. And it's easy to see that because of the form of this cycle, that equality will give a tau decomposition of the diagonal. So this is good to know, and because of this observation, in order to prove that result, I just need to show that if there is a cohomological decomposition of diagonal, there is one modulo algebraic equivalence. So I'm going to explain the proof of the result in dimension 3 and 4 because it's technically easier and it's based on this observation. I don't mention dimension 2 because dimension 2, the cubic surfaces are all rational, so it's not interesting. They are the decomposition. And dimension 1, they have never decomposition of diagonal because you have the elliptic curve, so surely they do not admit a cohomological decomposition of diagonal. So the key point is that for this problem, we can work instead. You see that all the problem is to study cycles in x cross x. The key point is that we will be able to study only cycles in heap 2 of X. Heap 2 of X is just a smooth version of the symmetric product. So there is a small descent problem which is delicate because so we have this. So this is a symmetric product. It is singular. We know we just blow up the diagonal. Okay, this. So this is this heap 2. It's more or less obvious that the cycle I am interested here it's a symmetric cycle. What is less clear and less obvious, but it's true, is the fact that this symmetric cycle it is coming from a cycle here. This is absolutely not obvious because this cycle is precisely the diagonal is precisely the fixed locus of this involution acting on x cross x. So it's not obvious that it is coming back from something. But the lemma is that so I see this as a correspondence. Let's call it sigma between so this x cross x, or maybe call it so just this rational map. Okay. And so this is a correspondence between x cross x and x2. And the lemma is that the diagonal delta x, it is the pullback of a cycle W to my x of dimension n. So this is really an essential point. Of course, how to say, modulo a coefficient of 2, it's obvious because you can descend and come back. But this coefficient of 2 is crucial in my story because I'm working with cubic hypersurfaces. It's well known that cubic hypersurfaces have, starting from dimension 2, they have a unirational parametrization of degree 2. So all my problems are related with 2 torsion. That is, if I allow multiplication by 2, my problems are completely disappearing. So I have to be very careful with the coefficients 2 here. So why this is true? It's very simple. So this x2, another way to see it is to say that here I have the x cross x blown up along the diagonal. So it has its exceptional divisor and over the diagonal, and the x2 is just the quotient of this x cross s blown up along the diagonal by the natural involution. Okay. So this is a 2-to-1 ramified cover, and because of this, there exists a delta. It's well known. Such that, so let me call R this double cover, such that R upper star delta is the exceptional divisor A. This is just a general theory of cyclic double covers, which tells you this. And then the cycle W I am interested is just take W, so that will be maybe up to a sign that will be delta to the n, because then the pullback of delta to the n to x cross x tilde, that will be a to the n. And a to the n, when you pull it back, push it forward to x cross x, it's essentially up to sign. This is the diagonal. Okay, so let me. So here I have the blow up map. What I call the f upper star is exactly by definition. So here it's just a rational map. The f upper star map is pulling back to this blow up and then pushing forward through this map too. So finally I get that f upper star delta to the n, it's by definition tau lower star of r upper star delta to the n. So it's a tau upper star a to the n, and of course it's So that fact explains why, in some sense, I am allowed to do geometry in this X2 rather than the full product. But here there is a non-trivial point, which is, well, it's based on that, but there is more. So the proposition. So let's assume. So I have to assume integral Hodge classes on X are algebraic. I mean, that is R classes of algebraic cycles. So this is true for the cubic threefold, of course, and it's also true for the cubic fourfold by a result of mine. And this is why I am not completely sure about the result for higher dimensional cubics of even dimension. Then, if X admits cohomological decomposition of the diagonal, there exists a cycle W, so which is in CH n of X of this second Hilbert scheme with the following properties. First of all, so I have this correspondence. So it's denoted by F. It's in fact, I should really think about it as given by the graph of this rational map. So as I explained, the F upper star, it's in fact the composition of two lower star composed with R upper star. So such that F upper star of W, it is delta X minus X cross X minus Z, and the Z is always of that form, that is Z is supported. It does not dominate X by the first projection. And the second important property is that the cohomology class of W is of torsion, in fact of two torsion. In the cohomology of X2. And it's not completely trivial even if we know that symmetric cycles on X cross X are coming from the Hilbert scheme. I had some difficulties, and that's why I asked Bert's help on the cohomology of the configuration space. So in order to get that statement, there are some small subtlety, but I don't want to give the proof of that. So in any case, so that so I have this, and this is now the properties that I want to apply to continue. Now by analyzing the geometry of this X2. So the construction, which is very specific, which already mentioned, is the following. So now X is a smooth cubic. No, in fact, in my case, there will be no torsion in cohomology. The important point is that the class essentially is cohomologous to 0. Here I am not saying much more. I am not saying much more than the fact that X admits a cohomological decomposition as a diagonal. I'm saying that you can see it by passing through the geometry of the Hilbert scheme. So indeed, so you this property, so if you forget about the two torsion, as soon as I put a 0 here, that will be the case here, because then by pull it back, that just says that this cycle is cohomologous to 0, which is the notion of a cohomological decomposition diagonal. The key point that I am saying, you can see that fact by there is a cohomological vanishing in Hill 2. So there is this obvious construction that was explained to us by Borisov in his talk. That if you take 2 points in X, you draw the line through these 2 points, and it meets your X at a third point Z. So that gives you a map like this. Okay. Now you can say better, namely, first of all, this map is obviously symmetric in X and Y. So that gives you something like this. And now you can say something better also, namely, over X, you have a projective Pn minus 1 bundle. Namely, it's defined as the set of pairs X, L, where L is a line passing through X. So it's an obvious Pn minus 1 bundle, which is restricted from the one which exists on projective space. Okay? And in fact, this map, it obviously lives like this. Simply because instead of just associating to X, Y, associating Z, you can do, so this map, it will associate to X, Y, so first the point Z, but also the line. And now the geometry of that map is the following. So if I was if X is an elliptic curve, a cubic curve in P2, this is indeed an isomorphism that makes the X2 of the elliptic curve a P1 bundle over the elliptic curve. But in general, there are some indeterminacies. Which are very simple. Of course, the indeterminacies, here they are related to the fact that there are lines in X, and each time you have a line which is contained in X, your Z is not well defined. So you see very well what happened. I call f of X the variety of lines in X, and then over this this f of X, so I have the obvious, this is a universal line. Okay, so this is again L is a point here, so okay. Okay, so I have this. So I have this universal P1 bundle, and obviously, so first of all, so this P, if you look at the definition, it's very clearly contained in Q. Okay, so the condition is that the line, if you compare with the definition of Q, the condition is that the line has to be contained in X. And the other fact that you see is that P2, so what I call P2 is you just take the symmetric product of this P1 bundle over f of X. Okay, so over each f of X, the P gives me a line P1, and the P2 will give me the second symmetric product of this line, so it's a P2 bundle. And this P2 now it lies in naturally in X2. Okay. And the result, which is not really not hard. Is the proposition, presumably very classical, that see, if you look at this morphism, let me call it phi. Phi induces an isomorphism between so X2 blown up along this P2 and this Q blown up along P. Okay, and not only one can say a little more. That is this isomorphism. It's in some sense, the two exceptional divisors are the same. That is, what happened for this map is that you blow up this P2, you get an exceptional divisor, and the effect of the map is that it recontracts this exceptional divisor onto the exceptional divisor of over P. So the exceptional divisors on both sides are the same, and the map has an effect on that. So the P, it's the P, it's the P1 bundle over f of X. Okay. So each line, so for each point of f of X, you have a line in X. So the second symmetric product of this line is contained in X2. So you have your P1, which is contained in X. Then you get a P2, which is your P1 2, which is contained in X. So it's a symmetric product, but it's okay. And these families of these P2s, which is contained, which makes this P2. Okay, so now let me prove the theorem. So I said, so now I consider the case of n minus 1. So now my x was, let me see, the dimension of x is n, so n is 3 or 4. And so suppose, so if x has a cohomological decomposition of diagonal, then I apply this proposition, so I get this W. So Chn of x2. So its cohomology class is 2 torsion, but in fact it has to be 0 because there is no there is no torsion in this group when X is a torsion-free so as notation in integral cohomology. So with the property that f upper star w is this corrected diagonal. Now I use the fact that my x2. Of course now I have this situation. Okay, so I have this thing. I blew up my P2, so I have something upstairs here, and here there is some blow down. I am here. So let me call G1 and G2 these two maps. So my G1 upper star W, it's on Z, but Z I explained that it's something very how to say. So it's very simple. It's just a blow up of Q along this P here. So the conclusion is that now we know very well how to describe cycles on a blow up. So I can write it as a G2 upper star of a cycle on Q. Plus, and here this is a blow up formula. So I have a cycle W double prime, which is supported on this exceptional divisor. Over P. Now it turns out that, let me analyze differently the two terms. Now the point is that lemma, so on a cubic hypersurface of dimension none greater than 4 cycles homologous to 0. So I didn't say this. Because my W is cohomologous to 0, then also these cycles are cohomologous to 0. Just a standard fact about blowers. So is algebraically equivalent to 0. And of course, here I can replace my cubic hypersurface X by any projective bundle over X, because we know very well how to compute the cycles on a projective bundle using the cycles on the base. The reason for this, well, for the threefold, it's essentially due to I think there is probably something due to Bloch and Srinivas. So it's a general fact due to Bloch and Srinivas that codimension 2 cycles, which are homologous to 0, are algebraically equivalent to 0 on a rationally connected variety in any dimension. So for codimension 2 cycle, I have no problem. And the only thing that could remain is a case of 1 cycles on cubic fourfold. And then it's a result which is due to Zhong and Tian recently, where they prove more generally that if you consider 1 cycles homologous to 0 on Fano complete intersections, they are algebraically equivalent to 0. So you get this. And so the conclusion is that because of this, I get that this cycle is algebraically equivalent to 0. And how I can get rid of this cycle is that the important point that it's easy to show that if I apply this, the F upper star to this cycle W double dot is supported on D cross X for some D proper closed algebraic subset of X. And so finally, the conclusion is that this equality, so essentially so the conclusion is that in fact my F upper star W, it is the sum of a cycle which is algebraically equivalent to 0 plus a cycle supported on some D cross X, and finally that says exactly that X admits decomposition of diagonal modulo algebraic equivalence. So this is the proof of the theorem, and I would like to explain a main application. It's an application, well, I'm not sure I can call it an application, but so the application is concerns, so there are also applications to the cubic fourfold, but let me consider the case of cubic threefolds. Okay. So for the cubic threefold, we have the intermediate Jacobian, D3 of X. It's known to be a 5-dimensional, principally polarized abelian variety, and the famous result of Clemens and Griffiths. It tells you, so of course it's canonically a principally polarized abelian variety. It has a canonical theta divisor, which comes from the intersection pairing on H3 of X Z. And the Clemens-Griffiths result tells that G3 of X is not isomorphic to a product of Jacobians. Of course, as a PPAV. So you have to take into account the polarization. And this is the way they prove that X is not rational. Now, being a product of Jacobian, it's well known to be equivalent by the Matsusaka result, that Matsusaka theorem, that there exists no curve C contained in G3 of X whose cohomology class is the so-called minimal class, namely theta 4 over 4 factorial. So this, what I call theta, so it's a cohomology class of the theta divisor. So it's in H2 of X Z. So sorry. So when you consider this class, it's quite easy to see that theta to the 4 belongs now to H8 of G3 of X Z. It is different, that it is divisible by 4 in integral cohomology. Obviously, theta to the 4, it's an algebraic class. It's the class of even of a curve in G3 of X. But the problem is that this class now divided by 4 factorial, we don't know whether it is algebraic or not. We just know it is an integral cohomology class. So the problem is theta 4 over factorial 4 factorial algebraic, which is not answered by the Clemens-Griffiths result, because the Clemens-Griffiths result, it just says that there is no curve with this class, but this is an effective curve. While for this problem, we ask whether this class it is a class of a one cycle, which may be a combination, of course, of positive and negative part. And I must say that in general, so maybe there are no examples, no known example of principally polarized abelian variety, say for the dimension d, with theta to the d minus 1 over d minus 1 factorial, not algebraic. So that would be a wonderful result. So in any case, I conclude the talk by the following statement. So the theorem. So if X is a cubic trifold, smooth of course, then CH0 of X is a unit universally trivial. So as I said, this is the same as X has a Chow decomposition of diagonal. If and only if this is a question of a positive answer. So that class theta 4 over 4 factorial is algebraic. So I think that I stop here. Of course, that uses the previous result because, as I said, proving that X has a true decomposition of the diagonal is equivalent to proving that it has a cohomological decomposition of the diagonal. And the cohomological decomposition of the diagonal, well, for trifolds, I have a list of necessary and sufficient conditions for the existence of a cohomological decomposition of the diagonal. And finally, for the cubic trifold, that reduces to just that algebraicity condition. I stop here.